In an age of social media, we've become accustomed to following the lives of content creators as they share their most intimate moments with the world. We watch them fall in love, travel to exotic locations, and build new lives in foreign countries. That's what I did as well as the case we're going to talk about today, Elliot Eastman. And this case really touches my heart deeply because I am an expat living in the Dominican Republic. And while living here, I have noticed how important it is to mesh in with the traditions and the cultures without standing out too much. Even though I do have a vlog on the Dominican Republic, I try to follow the rules as much as possible. But what happens when the camera stops rolling and the reality becomes a nightmare? Today we're exploring the tragic case of Elliot Eastman, a 26-year-old YouTuber from Vermont whose pursuit of love and adventure in the Philippines led to a horrifying ordeal that shocked the online community and highlighted the dangerous realities of life in one of the world's most volatile regions. This is a story about love, hope, and the ultimate price of living dangerous. You see, Elliot O'Neill Eastman was born and raised in Hinesburg, Vermont, a small town nestled in the Green Mountains with a population of just over 4,000 people. Growing up in this cute little American small town, Elliot graduated from Champlain Valley Union High School in 2016. Like many young Americans, he possessed an adventurous spirit and a desire to travel the world beyond the rolling hills of Vermont. Elliot wasn't content at all with the traditional path that many of his peers chose. While others settled into college routines or local jobs, Elliot dreamed of something bigger, something more exciting. He was drawn to the idea of travel, of experimenting and experiencing with different cultures, and of documenting his adventures for others to see. People like yourself who want to do the same thing or want to live vicariously through Elliot's adventures. In 2023, at the age of 25, Elliot made a decision that would change his life forever. I know a lot of people that go to the Philippines, to Thailand, here to the Dominican Republic, Colombia. But he decided the Philippines because it was a country known for its stunning landscapes, warm people, and unfortunately, its complex security challenges, particularly in the southern regions. The Philippines, an archipelago of over 7,000 islands, has been a destination for Western travelers seeking adventure, romance, and a lower cost of living. But the southern Philippines, particularly the Mindanao region, has been plagued by decades of conflict, kidnapping, and terrorism. The U.S. State Department has consistently warned Americans about traveling to these areas, with some regions classified as do not travel zones or red zones. But Elliot, like many young adventurers, may not have fully understood the risks. What started as a travel adventure quickly became something much more profound for Elliot. In July 2023, he met a local woman named Carisha, and their connection was immediate and powerful. In his own words, posted on his YouTube channel, Elliot described, "I came to the Philippines about a year and a half ago, where I met the love of my life deep in the mountains of the red zone of the Philippines." The term red zone is significant there. It refers to areas with the highest security risks, places where government control is limited, and where criminal and terrorist groups operate with relative impunity. Despite these obvious dangers, love had taken hold, and Elliot was determined to make his life in the beautiful but perilous region. By July 2023, Elliot and Carisha were married. For Elliot, this wasn't just a marriage, it was the beginning of what he hoped would be a new chapter in his life. He settled in Cebuco, a coastal town in Zamboanga del Norte province, on the island of Mindanao. This area is the part of Bangsamoro region, which has been the site of ongoing conflict between government forces and various militant groups for decades. Elliot began documenting a lot of his life through social media, particularly YouTube and Facebook. His content showed glimpses of his daily life with Carisha, the beautiful landscapes of the Philippines, and his attempts to integrate into local culture. For his followers, it seemed like a fairy tale. A young American finding love and happiness in a tropical paradise. But fairy tales, as we know, don't always have happy endings. While Elliot's social media presence portrayed a life of adventure and romance, the reality of living in one of the world's most dangerous regions was far more complex. The southern Philippines has been dubbed one of the global hotspots for kidnapping, particularly targeting foreigners who are seen as valuable commodities for ransom. The area where Elliot chose to make his home has been the operational base for numerous criminal and terrorist organizations, including Abu Sayyaf, a group known for its brutal kidnapping tactics and connections to international terrorism. The Zulu Sea, which borders the region, the area where Elliot chose to make his home, has been the operational base for numerous criminal and terrorist organizations, including Abu Sayyaf, a group known for its brutal kidnapping tactics and connections to international terrorism. The Zulu Sea, which borders the region where Elliot lived, has been called a highway for kidnappers due to the numerous small islands and waterways that provide perfect hiding spots and escape routes. Local authorities had been dealing with a surge in kidnapping cases targeting both locals and foreigners. The modus operandi was often similar. Armed men, sometimes posing as law enforcement, they would abduct victims from their homes or while traveling, then demand ransom from families or governments. For many in the international community, it seemed only a matter of time before tragedy would strike someone like Elliot, a visible American living openly in social media in one of the world's most dangerous kidnapping zones. The Philippine government and international security experts had repeatedly warned against the kind of lifestyle Elliot was living. The U.S. Embassy in Manila regularly issued security advisories specifically warning American citizens against travel to the areas where Elliot had made his home. But love, as they say, is blind. And Elliot seemed determined to make his relationship work despite the numerous risks. October 17, 2024. That is when the nightmare began. But the day started like any other day for Elliot and Carisha in their home in Cebuco. The 26-year-old YouTuber had no way of knowing that this would be the day his new life in paradise would come to a horrifying end. As evening approached, 4 men arrived at Elliot's residence. But these weren't ordinary visitors or even ordinary criminals. These men were armed with military-grade weapons, including M16 rifles, and they had come prepared for violence. In a calculated move designed to minimize resistance, the kidnappers presented themselves as police officers. This tactic is unfortunately common in the region, where the line between legitimate law enforcement and criminal activity can sometimes blur, and where impersonating officers provides criminals with an element of surprise and authority. But Elliot wasn't going quietly. When the men attempted to abduct him, Elliot fought back with everything he had. Perhaps his life in Vermont had instilled in him a sense of self-reliance, or maybe his love for Carisha gave him the courage to resist. Whatever the motivation, Elliot's decision to fight would have tragic consequences. During the struggle, the kidnappers shot Elliot twice with an M16 rifle, once in the leg and once in the abdomen. These weren't warning shots or attempts to wound. These were serious injuries inflicted by high-powered military weapons. These types of weapons will tear through the flesh and tear it apart, and without an ER, an emergency room, close enough, it's very unlikely anybody could survive those wounds. Carisha, Elliot's wife, was forced to watch this horrifying scene unfold. The trauma of seeing her husband shot and dragged away by armed men is difficult to imagine. She was left behind, screaming and helpless, as the kidnappers forcibly carried her wounded husband to a waiting motorized bangka, a traditional Filipino boat. The kidnappers then escaped across the waters of the Zulu Sea, disappearing into the maze of small islands and waterways that make this region a perfect haven for criminals. Elliot, bleeding from his gunshot wounds, was now in the hands of men who had already shown they were willing to use lethal force. News of Elliot's kidnapping spread quickly through both local and international channels. The Philippine National Police immediately launched a search operation, while the U.S. government was notified of the abduction of one of its citizens. Within days, FBI agents arrived in the Philippines to assist with the investigation. This wasn't unusual. American law enforcement agencies regularly collaborate with foreign governments when U.S. citizens are kidnapped abroad, particularly in cases involving potential terrorism or organized crime. The local mayor of Cebuco, recognizing the severity of this situation and perhaps hoping to encourage local cooperation, offered a reward of $2,500 for information leading to Elliot's whereabouts. While this might seem like a modest amount, in a region where the average monthly income is significantly lower than Western standards, it represented a substantial incentive for information. Search operations were immediately launched across the Zulu Sea and surrounding areas. Philippine military forces, including naval units, began combing the waters and conducting raids on suspected hideouts. The challenging geography of the region, with its thousands of small islands, hidden coves, and dense jungle cover, made the search extraordinarily difficult. Meanwhile, Carisha and Elliot's family back in Vermont waited desperately for news. The international media began picking up the story, and Elliot's social media followers, people who had been following his love story and new life in the Philippines, were suddenly confronted with the harsh reality of the dangers he had been living with. But as days turned into weeks, no ransom demands came. No proof of life was provided. The silence was ominous and deeply troubling to everyone involved in the search. In late October 2024, Philippine authorities achieved their first breakthrough in the case. 3 suspects connected to Elliot's kidnapping were arrested during police operations. These arrests provided hope that the case might be solved and that Elliot might still be recovered alive. However, the information that emerged from these arrests would dash any hopes for a positive outcome. During interrogations, law enforcement officials began to piece together what had likely happened to Elliot after his abduction. The picture that emerged was grim. According to statements from the arrested suspects, Elliot's gunshot wounds, inflicted during his brave attempt to resist the kidnapping, had been more serious than initially hoped. The wounds to his leg and abdomen, caused by high-powered military weapons, had likely been fatal or near fatal. But the investigation was far from over. Authorities were still searching for additional suspects, and the exact circumstances of what happened to Elliot after his abduction remained unclear. The 3 arrests represented progress, but they also raised more questions about the scope of the criminal network involved and the ultimate fate of the young YouTuber. The case was becoming increasingly complex, with investigators trying to determine whether this was a simple kidnapping for ransom that went wrong, or whether there was a larger criminal or terrorist connection involved. In December 2024, nearly 2 months after Elliot's kidnapping, Philippine authorities made a grim announcement that would devastate his family and followers around the world. Based on testimony from captured suspects and evidence gathered during the investigation, police concluded that Elliot Eastman was likely dead. The young man who had traveled halfway around the world for love had apparently died from the gunshot wounds sustained during his kidnapping. But the story became more horrific. According to witness testimony from one of the captured kidnappers, after Elliot succumbed to his injuries, his body was thrown into the Zulu Sea. The revelation meant that not only was Elliot presumed dead, but his body might never be recovered denying his family and wife even the closure of being able to lay him to rest properly. The lieutenant colonel, a regional police spokesman, confirmed to media outlets that the investigation had led them to believe Elliot had died from the gunshot wounds. The witness testimony came after a dramatic shootout between police and the kidnappers, during which additional suspects were either killed or captured. For Carisha, the news represented the end of her worst nightmare and the confirmation of her deepest fears. The man she had married just over a year earlier, who had traveled thousands of miles to be with her, was gone forever. For Elliot's family back in Vermont, the news was equally devastating. Their son, who had left home seeking adventure and love and a transformation in life, would never return home. Despite the presumption of Elliot's death, Philippine authorities emphasized that the investigation was far from over. While rescue operations were no longer realistic, the search for justice continued. The case had revealed the involvement of what appeared to be a sophisticated criminal network operating in the region. The fact that the kidnappers were armed with military-grade weapons and operated with apparent impunity suggested connections to larger criminal or terrorist organizations. Presidential Peace Advisor Carlito Galvez Jr. made an interesting statement about the case, suggesting that this might not have been a traditional kidnapping for ransom. This raised questions about the kidnappers' true motivations and whether Elliot had been specifically targeted for reasons beyond just his potential value as a hostage. The FBI's continued involvement in the case indicated that government authorities were treating this as a serious international incident, possibly with connections to terrorism or organized crime that could have border implications for American citizens in the region. Investigators were also working to understand how many people were involved in the kidnapping and whether this was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern of criminal activity targeting foreigners in the region. Elliot's case, while tragic and unique in its details, unfortunately represents a broader pattern of violence and kidnapping that has plagued the southern Philippines for decades. The region has been the site of ongoing conflict involving various separatist groups, criminal organizations, and terrorist networks. The Bangsamoro region, where Elliot lived, has been particularly affected by this violence. Despite ongoing peace processes and government efforts to establish stability, the presence of groups like Abu Sayyaf has made the area extremely dangerous for both locals and foreigners. Kidnapping has become a significant source of funding for these groups, with foreigners being particularly valuable targets due to their governments, families, and the ability for them to pay large ransoms. The geographic features of the region, thousands of small islands connected by waterways, make it nearly impossible for authorities to completely secure the area. The U.S. State Department has maintained travel advisories for the region for years, specifically warning Americans about the risks of kidnapping, terrorism, and violent crime. These warnings exist precisely because of cases like Elliot's, where well-meaning travelers have become victims of the region's complex security challenges. Elliot's story serves as a tragic reminder that love and adventure, while very powerful motivators, cannot overcome the harsh realities of geopolitical conflict and criminal violence. One of the most haunting aspects of Elliot's case is how his social media presence has become a digital memorial to his truncated life. His YouTube channel and Facebook profile, which once documented his happiness and new life with Carisha, now serve as a frozen snapshot of dreams cut short. Elliot's online content reveals a young man who was genuinely happy and optimistic about his future in the Philippines. His post shows someone who was trying to integrate into local culture, learn the language, and build a genuine life with his wife. There's no indication that he fully understood the dangers he was facing. But his intuition was telling him there was something wrong. The comment sections of his videos have become spaces for mourning and remembrance, with viewers from around the world expressing their grief and shock at his fate. Many comment on how his story has opened their eyes to the dangers that exist in certain parts of the world, dangers that can seem abstract until they become devastatingly real. His case has also sparked discussions in the travel and expatriate communities about the responsibility that comes with choosing to live in high-risk areas. While no one blames Elliot for his fate, his story has become a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding and respecting travel advisories and security warnings. Elliot actually became a lender of money in his community. He would lend locals money, and they would pay him back at a higher interest. Some people felt that he was doing something like taking advantage of the locals, instead of giving back to them and thanking them for them allowing him to be a part of the culture. It seemed like he was a vulture. And that is just what some people are saying because of the businesses that he was trying to start. And there should never be a blame on a victim. Victim shaming is the worst thing that someone can do, especially to someone whose life has been taken. Elliot thought that he was going to do business in this small area. He was 26 years old, dreams of being an entrepreneur. He got into the culture and he saw what many people are doing. He had a couple of bucks and he was lending it. But the story of Elliot Eastman is ultimately a story about the collision between dreams and reality, between love and danger, between the digital age's sense of boundless possibilities and the harsh limitations imposed by geopolitical conflict and criminal violence. Elliot was not necessarily reckless in any traditional sense, but he definitely was adventurous. He was a young man who fell in love. Some people might call him naive. He wanted to build a life with the person he cared about most, but even she was afraid many times. His decision to move to the Philippines was motivated by the most human of desires, the wish to be with someone he loved. But his story also illustrates the importance of understanding the world's complexity and the real dangers that exist in certain regions. The romantic notion of love conquering all circumstances, while beautiful in theory, cannot overcome armed criminals with military weapons and networks sophisticated enough to operate with impunity. As of today, Elliot's body has never been recovered from the Zulu Sea. The investigation continues, but the young man from Vermont who sought love and adventure in paradise is gone forever. His story serves as both a tragedy and a warning, a reminder that in our interconnected world, understanding local conditions and security realities is not just advisable. It can be a matter of life and death. For Carisha, for Elliot's family in Vermont, and for the thousands of people who followed his journey online, the pain of his loss will likely never fully heal. But perhaps his story can serve as a cautionary tale that might prevent similar tragedies in the future. In the end, Elliot Eastman's legacy is not just the happiness he shared online or the love he found in the Philippines, but also the sobering reminder that even in our age of global connectivity and endless possibilities, some risks remain very real, and some prices are too high to pay, even for love. The case of Elliot Eastman remains officially open, though hope for his survival has been abandoned as authorities continue their investigation and search for the remaining suspects. Questions about his death and the motivations behind his kidnapping may eventually be answered. But for now, we're left with the image of a young man who traveled halfway around the world for love, only to become a victim of the complex and dangerous realities of a region torn by conflict and criminal violence. Rest in peace, Elliot Eastman. Your story will not be forgotten. Thank you for joining Fairfax Files. Please be safe out there. If you have any questions on becoming an expat, especially in the Dominican Republic, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my information in the description below. And I wish you well on your travels. Always remember to be safe, and wise. Have a good day. Thank you for joining. Please take a moment to subscribe to my channel to help it grow. And don't forget to hit the like button to let YouTube know that you enjoyed watching my content. I'll see you next week. Be safe out there.